Hey, David, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I've seen a couple of your comments on Twitter, and I really like how you think. I think that there are a few things that my audience can learn from you, of course. I came across one of your tweets. You responded to one of my posts actually, and it was really interesting to me because I think a lot of people do think this way. So let me just share the tweet here. So I said this was kind of a joke. I said if you're a CFA charter holder and you're telling your clients Bitcoin is comparable to tulips, please let me know so I can report you for not doing your due diligence. And the reason why I said this is because I got reported for promoting Bitcoin and people told me that I wasn't doing my due diligence. They thought it was going to zero. And keep in mind, this was back when Bitcoin was at 40, 50K. So you responded, you said, my neighbor, also a financial advisor, wanted to partner with me. He has zero knowledge on Bitcoin and refused to learn because it doesn't pay commission. I refuse to work with him because Bitcoin is the only instrument I would advise anyone full-heartedly. Why do you feel this way? Why do you think that your financial advisor friend isn't willing to do the studying and the work to learn how Bitcoin works?
Well, Bitcoin doesn't pay commission, to put it very short. And his horizon may have been somewhat limited to what his company tells him to sell. And so he basically refused, and I tried to talk him into it many times. I really took time to explain it to him. And at a certain point, he actually acknowledged the significance and how deeply involved I was in the topic. But he dismissed it because he was just out for profit to get commission and sell products, financial products, which pay commission without actually wanting the best for his customers. And there is no way I'm going to advise a client to sign a life insurance, for example, at this point in time, or any other financial instrument. Bitcoin is the only way at this point, in my opinion. There might be certain situations where you need to deviate from Bitcoin, but if I were to full-heartedly advise anybody to some kind of investment or savings instrument, Bitcoin is king. It's the only way, and I therefore could not join the partnership and decline.
Why would you tell people to buy Bitcoin over anything else? Like let's say for example, over real estate.
I do love real estate, to be honest. Let me take, sorry, see you're coming to the, I love real estate. It's for aesthetics and also leverage. You
Hmm.
can have a down payment 20% and leverage 80%. I think it's interesting as a business model. I know that you do not agree with that. You're quite against that. I think we can discuss that.
Of course.
But I think the time is over where real estate is the actual store of value. People are looking for for a better way, and Bitcoin is the better way, mainly because also it's simplified to such a degree that you can take it over borders. You can take it into your death grave. You can do what it's true property, as Michael Saylor also points out. It's the first true property that we actually have ever had in history is Bitcoin. And real estate can be taken away from you at any point and has been in history. And so I like real estate, but the time is over and it's time for Bitcoin.
I
Mainly
do think
also because real estate has a significant inflation also. People are building houses all the time, governments, whatever. Look at China having ghost towns of real estate. It's Bitcoin is capped, and so Bitcoin is the way to go.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think real estate is great for business purposes.
Yes.
If let's say for example, if you want to build houses and you want to develop them, put them into the market, I think that's great. I think that's perfectly fine. You deserve to make money if you're doing that. If you're putting in the work, the
Then I
time, the
actually
effort.
understood you wrong. I have to admit that I understood you wrong. I thought you were generally against doing business with real estate.
Mm. No, no, no. Real estate is fine. I mean, people need houses to live in. The only thing that I don't like is the idea of being a landlord. I don't like the idea of somebody buying as many houses as they can and then renting them out to someone who needs the place to live and then trying to
Hmm.
make a profit off it. I don't personally like that because what it does is it pushes the price of homes up.
Yeah,
It increases competition for people who want to buy houses. And they're not really creating any value after that. Of course, they're taking the risk, but they don't need to. They're just taking additional risk for no reason, right? The person who wants to
yeah.
buy the house, they can just take the risk. I mean, the landlord is saying, "Oh, I'm taking the risk so I can make all this profit. I deserve this profit because I'm taking this risk." Don't take the risk. Take the risk in something else and make more money, right? I mean, I don't
Totally
see it
agree.
being. I don't see it being worth it anymore. I don't see. I used to want to be a landlord. I used to want to own real estate,
Me
and
too.
right, and it doesn't make any sense to me anymore because why would I want to put my 20% down payment on a house when instead I could put that 20% towards Bitcoin and outperform massively and just completely destroy any expectations that anyone has of real estate. So I think real estate as a business is perfectly fine. People can build as many houses as they want to. If they want to go and build a house and make a profit, go for it. That's great. I do think that we have too many houses though. I think we have more than enough.
That's the point.
Like
That's
what you
exactly
mentioned.
the point.
Yeah,
It's where I was wondering, like, okay, if you don't make business with, if there's no incentive to make profit with building real estate, then you basically leave it up to the government to
yeah.
provide housing. And we, for example, in East Germany, in East Berlin, I lived about 10 years in East Berlin, and they built these houses, government housing, and DDR, and they were basically just very thin walls,
Mm,
basically
low quality.
boxes,
Wow.
just to build shelter. And nobody wants to live in there. I don't think government should provide housing because the result is you live in a box with no love to detail. Like if you look at socialist, communist architecture, it's very different to Western architecture because they made it basically very squared, which symbolizes here and now instead of salvation in the future, like a church which is directed upwards. And so you
Wow.
have. I learned this from my history teacher, and it
Yeah, I had no
completely
idea.
blew my mind. And when I looked through Berlin, I was seeing all the socialist architecture, which were the ugliest thing ever, and nobody wants to live in that place. And the prices are so cheap that it actually attracts low income people so that people just don't want to go there and live there anymore. And so giving uh, government the responsibility to build houses is only in emergency situations such as immigration crisis, for example, to provide housing quickly and for emergency situations. But otherwise, I think there needs to be an incentive to build good houses. There needs to be, in my opinion, to be competition. Um, and I still love the real estate market, but as you mentioned, the times are over. I don't want to have the hassle of dealing with the people. I mean, you can outsource that to a management or something like that, which costs money. Um, but it's so much hassle, and you're also so restricted in your mobility because in German, real estate is called immobility, so you
Mm,
can't move it, and that's a problem, especially nowadays in times of potential war. You can't take your house, put it in your backpack, and cross the border. Um, your house is going to get blown up, and
yeah.
you can take your Bitcoin and you can put it in your pocket and go wherever you want without anybody knowing. And so there's a huge benefit in that. And I think people are going to realize that more and more. And real estate is going to lose value. But we also have to account for inflation, which increases the value of housing, reduces the
Yeah.
debt So if you have a lot of debt, then inflation is actually playing in your favor. So it's a very interesting business model. I'm not against it, but I prefer the lazy method and the more profitable method, which is simply holding Bitcoin. Period. Like that's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's the easiest way to do it. I actually saw this meme. Oh, here it is. I found it. I saw this meme that really shows you what's happening with real estate. Let me just show you quickly. Give me 1 second here. There you go. So people think that they're good at real estate. They think that they're great at managing properties and making money somehow through real estate. But it's actually just inflation that's pushing the
Right.
price up. It's not even. It's not even really growth. You're not really creating anything of value. You're not. You're just extracting value from society, and you're basically getting your government to bail you out by pumping more and more dollars into the system. Because if there weren't more dollars being pumped into the system, real estate prices would crash significantly and they would keep crashing forever. I don't think that's the case for Bitcoin, because what Bitcoin would do is it would extract value from every other asset because of all the benefits that you outlined. You said, oh, it's portable. You can put it in your pocket. You don't have to worry about mobility. You can do all that with real estate. With Bitcoin, but with real estate, you can't. So I think because there are thousands, millions of landlords out there who own real estate primarily because they want it as a store of value. And all those people, I wouldn't be surprised if they start dumping their real estate if the prices start coming down, if they start dumping their real estate and they move all that wealth into Bitcoin.
Yes, I think that's going to be the case. I agree with that. There is actually a law in Germany. I personally find the idea of using inflation within real estate interesting because it reduces debt. You take on a huge amount of debt, inflation pays it off, and whoever's renting pays it off. Now we can question the ethics about that because everybody's paying for that, essentially, like you just stated. Um, and I think it's still a good business model. But yeah, I'm losing my train of thought right now. So
That's okay. It's a good business model because everybody's paying for it, right? I think it's a good business model for the landlord because they don't have to pay for it. I mean that's of course what it is. If you don't have to pay for something and you can get to make a profit off of it, then of course it's a good business model for the individual. I think that like I get that part. I completely agree with you, but I think it's more about the moral side of things, right? What
yeah.
you're doing is you're taking value, you're taking properties away from people who actually want to live in them. And I don't like that. I don't
Mhm.
like that idea at all because I mean, people who cares what I think, right? Most people don't care what I think. They don't care, but it's just the reality of it, right? I think the market will eventually figure it out, and
For
it'll
sure.
figure out that it's not worth it anymore to buy real estate. And I think that's what's going to really crush the price of housing. It's not even like it's like, have you seen that quote from, is it Hayek or Mises? You need a sly roundabout way to change the money that we use. I don't know what the quote is exactly, but essentially what it is saying is that governments aren't going to figure it out.
No, they won't.
Individuals won't figure it out on their own. All you have to do is you have to find a way that eventually can replace the dollar, that can replace the current financial system. And then eventually at that point, when if the dollar is replaced, we don't need real estate as a savings value, as a saving tool, because we have something else.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think the topic of the US dollar is hugely underrated and overrated in the Bitcoin community. And we, like all of us, are guilty of tracking the price of Bitcoin and US dollar. And that is fundamentally wrong because for one, that implies speculation that you can uh, acquire a certain amount of dollars with your Bitcoin. Second, you're giving more significance to the US dollar than you are to Bitcoin because you're valuing Bitcoin in dollars. So I think that's something we need to really stop valuing cryptocurrency in fiat money.
Mm.
Uh, it's inherently wrong. We need to start having the economy pricing goods and services in Bitcoin, that needs to be the base layer, the global layer, a global reserve currency. And then everybody can have their fiat currency on top of it, backed by Bitcoin. That's how I see that it should be constructed and will be in the future. I see that coming quite soon. But valuing things in US dollar is just giving it too much value, giving the dollar too much significance, in my opinion.
I think we do need a unit of account. That's the only reason why we use the US dollar, right? That's the only reason why we use the US dollar to value Bitcoin. I think the only reason why we do that is because it's just a global standard, right? We the entire world is willing to accept US dollars. So if you think about it, the entire world will probably have US dollars to pay for Bitcoin. It's just the most liquid market. I mean, you can use
Yeah,
Canadian dollars, you can use yen, you can use won, you can
correct.
Berlin. What's the Berlin currency? Or sorry, what's the Germany currency?
We have euro
Euros?
and
Oh yeah, yes.
euro.
You can use
Yeah,
euros. Yeah, I mean you can use any currency to value, right? I think it's just the way that we see the world today. It's just the lens that we have. Where
right, right.
yeah, that's really it. I and a lot of people do say that. A lot of people say, "Oh, why is Bitcoin valued in U.S. dollars?" It's because that's the lens that we have. That's just how we see
The,
the world.
the way I see it is,
Mhm.
you're currently right now, that's the way it is right now. But if we look back, I don't know, 1800s, we basically had a global gold standard, and
Right.
everybody had currencies backed by gold. They were just IOUs on gold. So we had a global consensus of a unit of account, which was gold. And that's where I see Bitcoin needs to go. We need to have a global Bitcoin currency, and every nation needs to maintain their sovereignty through a unit of account, a fiat currency, or whatever. So a hybrid model is going to play out, if not thousands of currencies, because we also have altcoins and everything like that that can't be denied.
Yeah.
Um, it's a part of the system. If you like it or not, it's there. And so I think that's where I hope Bitcoin will go in the future, and that we can change the focus from US dollar onto Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. I think eventually we shouldn't be. I saw this. I think maybe it was Safedin Amus. He was saying how in the current system we barter between currencies. We basically have to exchange one currency for the other. Nobody really knows what the value of each currency is. We go based on just what other people think. Because let's say, for example, the Canadian dollar and the U.S. dollar. I don't personally know how many Canadian dollars are worth
Right.
one US dollar. It's just the
Yeah.
market, right? It's just the most recent trade and event. And over time, the Canadian dollar is just losing more and more value. So why wouldn't we just go to a global US dollar standard? That probably won't work because, of course, we have these other currencies and everybody wants their own controlled system. But with Bitcoin, like you said, if we have just a Bitcoin based system, it's a neutral currency that nobody can control and everybody can control at the same time,
People
essentially.
money. It's people money and not government money. And
Exactly.
I think what's really important is the ability to print money is what makes the dollar a problem.
Yeah.
Well, let me differentiate. I think Keynesianism was actually smart. If the economy grows, you need more currency in circulation. If the economy shrinks, you need to pull out that excess amount out of circulation. So if you come into an economic depression, you can basically give the economy a loan through inflation to help it get back on its feet. Just like any small company, you give it a loan and it gives it time to create profit. And so I think it is a really smart model, actually, as it was initially intended, elastic money, so to speak. The problem is that it has been completely abused and misused, and it is completely corrupted. And there is no relationship between GDP and the amount of money that is being printed. So
Yeah.
inflation is not anything bad, but you need to have the equivalent GDP catching up with it. for it to be balanced.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I think the problem really isn't the theory of Keynesianism. I think that it's the practice. So what we do is
Right. Yeah.
we're supposed to be, let's say for example, if we have population growth, we're supposed to add money to the system, and then at some point, or let's say for example, if a company is struggling, we give them money. At a point when they're not struggling, we're supposed to tax them, but we're not. We're not taking that money out of the system. That's the problem, right?
Right.
Even for real estate, for example, we want real estate prices to go up, but when real estate prices go up, when they actually start rising and go to these enormous levels, we don't take money out of the system to bring those house prices back down.
Yes, I fully agree with that. And I think you're the perfect person to talk to about a subject that actually came up over the last 2 to 3 days in my mind. It is slightly off topic, and
That's
so if I would like to take a little bit of a contrary and devil's advocate approach,
absolutely.
um, if that's okay for you.
That's what makes these conversations so fun. I like it. Let's do it.
Totally agree, and I'm very happy that you are open-minded to think about these things. For the last few weeks, I have been digging into AI.
Okay.
Now, looking into AI, what I find is that things are becoming significantly cheaper, like extremely cheap and automated. And I'll give you one example. Recently, I just built an agent, an AI agent, which is able to develop an application, upload it to GitHub, create its own issue, and repair the application all completely by itself. And I pay nothing for it.
Wow.
Completely zero. Now those are just about maybe 10, 15 steps. Now AI agents are able to, good people are doing 500 to 1,000 automated steps, completely autonomous AI agents. Where am I going with this? Mark Andreessen, for example, says that by 2034, many things will become 1,000 times cheaper.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that post from you.
And I found that extremely interesting because I see it actually happening now. You can develop a full stack application for zero. And just 10 years ago, you would have paid at least 6 digits, if not millions, or in some cases, even billions, to maintain it over years. Now it's completely automated. So everything is, not everything, but many things are going to become free, near free. Now, that raises for me a huge question. What does that mean to our monetary system if everything becomes free?
I
No.
don't think it'll become free. I think what'll happen is that it'll become so abundant that we won't need to charge for it, right? The way that I see it, I mean, free just means that there's no cost of. Um, I think there's what we would say is there's no cost of production. That's what I would say free is, because you can give something to someone else. There's no reason for you to get money. Maybe I'm thinking of this wrong, but the way that I see it, with AI, you can reproduce more and more things. You can keep producing more and more things, and because there's no human labor, human resources involved,
Exactly.
then it
That's
becomes
exactly.
free. And I saw the post that you put up about this from from, was it Mark Andreessen?
Yeah.
You mentioned how, why are we saving in why are we saving in something when why are we saving money when things are going to become free? So let me show you here the let me for context for my audience here, 1 second.
Mhm.
I'll just share the post. So it says, by 2034, your 9 to 5 job will be extinct. Everything will be so cheap you won't have to work anymore. This is Mark Andreessen's latest. And then what you said was, question, if everything becomes 1,000 times cheaper, what value are we trying to store with financial instruments? I think what we're trying to store is we're trying to store our time. We're trying to store the thing that we can't get back, right? Where when we have, like, let's say for example, if the trinkets that we need or the trinkets that we want, let's say for example, we get so good at creating. I don't know what would even become free. I didn't actually see the thread, but what would actually become free in that case? Do you remember what the thread said? Maybe I'll open it up just now.
For example, legal advisory. I'll give you a few examples.
Okay.
Um, you can create an AI agent, develop it as a developer, say a lead developer. Now you have an assistant that is an autonomous developer.
Yeah.
Now you tell that developer to develop 10 other junior developers. Now you prompt that lead developer to create 10 next big things per day, like next Facebooks, next Googles, next Amazons per day. And this happens, they build it at completely full stack from back end to front end, marketing, sales funnel, legal. They can basically, you can have AI agents as legal advisors. You can build teams of AI agents. Um, there's a lot of everything that is digital basically, and also offline. There are a huge amount of situations where you can kind of build armies of agents that work for you and that actually give you back your time. So like you said, what we're trying to store is our time, but actually automation, machinery, and AI are giving us our time so that we actually have time to do what we consider matters most instead
Mhm.
of having to do a 9 to 5 just to get by. Now, if you think about the power that that actually brings, being able to create for near zero, it's open source. The code is open source. All you have to do is learn a little bit, or you have to know how to formulate a prompt, just like ChatGPT. You don't really
Yeah.
need any more at this point already. Like it's unimaginable.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think the things that we pay for today, like legal briefs, legal advice, the things that were in the example, I think we're going to get those for free, but I think we're still going to be willing to pay for, let's say, vacations. Right, we're still going to be willing to pay for entertainment because those things won't be free. Let's say, for example, if you want to go to a beachfront property and just lay on your back the whole time, and you want somebody else to serve you, that's not going to be free, right? We still need people to do that, unless we have robots, for example, right? Maybe robots
But
come in and stuff.
that's already a reality that the robot's already there.
Yeah,
Now, Elon Musk just recently showed his robot catching a ball. I mean,
yeah, wow,
that's some serious stuff right there.
yeah,
That robot will be able to cut hair soon.
wow,
That might be a little bit more complicated. I'm just making
of
that
course,
assumption. Um, and where I actually want to go to is now you create one agent. This agent is self-maintaining, self-sustaining, self-updating, and it becomes exponentially more intelligent in itself, but also thanks to narrow AI and general AI advancing, which is a much steeper curve exponentially than anything that has ever been seen, um, including Bitcoin. Now,
yeah.
if you create 100 agents that guide you for the rest of your life and for the next generations, isn't that maybe a better store of value than Bitcoin?
I mean, technically, you can't use it as a store of value, though, right? Because it's
That,
open source. Anybody can.
that's where my thoughts break a little bit. I agree with
Yeah.
that. I haven't thought that through, so I would love to. Sorry for interrupting, but I would love to hear your
No,
thoughts on it.
no. So the way that I see it, I get what you're saying. I think it'll make things cheaper. Like, let's say, for example, we can't use water as a store of value. We can't use air as a store of value. It's
Right there.
everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Everybody has it. Everybody wants it. The thing that we use as a store of value is something that is scarce, right? There are certain qualities that a store of value has to have. A form of money has to have. If something doesn't have those qualities, then you can't really use it as a store of value, right? So let's say, for example, we have particles of sand. People aren't going to use sand as a store of value, right?
Right.
Because of the fact that it's abundant. I actually have a chart that I made. I'll actually open it up. Maybe my audience will find this valuable. These are the characteristics that we need money to have, right? So fungible, portable, durable, divisible, scarce, decentralized. I think decentralized is something that's more important now than it was before, and something that's
Yeah.
saleable. So, for example, do you know what these mean?
Yes, of course.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so if something
Well,
doesn't have these things,
salable, I have to question that one.
saleable,
Oh,
saleable.
saleable in the sense of being able to sell it.
So what that means, in my opinion, what that means is that, so when you're doing a transaction, you're selling something and you're buying something in exchange. You're not giving away your dollars, and you're basically selling somebody your dollars, and then you're buying whatever they have. You're exchanging. It's a buy
Okay.
and sell, right? So saleable just means that other people are willing to accept whatever you have to offer.
So sellable, so to speak.
Saleable, sellable, whatever the word is. I don't know
Yeah.
what the word is.
Okay.
This is
I
something
got
that
it.
Seyfuddin Namus mentioned this in his book.
Okay. Okay.
But it made sense to me, right? I mean,
Of course.
maybe it's not the official way to think of it, but to me it makes sense. I don't think this was something that Vijay Boyapati had in his paper, but I added a
I've
couple
never
things.
heard that word before.
Yeah, so the ones that I added were decentralized and saleable. So these last two, these ones are things that other people know about. Of course, they already know about these ones: fungible, portable, durable, divisible. I think what I'm trying to say here is that we need something that has these characteristics, and AI doesn't have these characteristics. So, for example, if a code is open source, you can use it to create other things of value, but
Mhm.
it doesn't have these characteristics, so you can't really use it as money. So, let's say, for example, if you can create something out of thin air and you try to pay me for, let's say I have my keys. You want my car, for example. You can't really pay me with code, right? Because if you give it to me, then I can replicate it. I can keep creating more and more of it. Essentially, that's the problem, in my opinion, with the dollar, right? Because
Okay.
the dollar is something that can be created out of thin air. It's not scarce. There is no limited supply. On the other hand, with something like Bitcoin, there is a limited supply. With Bitcoin, even if we don't need to pay for anything, I think just having, let's say, 1 Bitcoin or zero point 0.1 Bitcoin or 0.01 Bitcoin, a million Satoshis at some point,
Mhm.
just that on its own will be an accomplishment, right? I think people will see that as an accomplishment. But the thing is that not everybody can have that, right? If you think about it, how many people can have a million satoshis? 2.1
Okay.
billion, 2.1 billion people in the entire world, and then on top of that, people have thousands of Bitcoin. So what's the total number of people that can own 1 million satoshis? Maybe less than a billion people. Maybe less than 500 million, right? So I think that's what gives it that status, so people actually find value in it. They want it because it's something that you can't replicate. On the other hand, with code, for example, you can use code to create value. You can use code to create utility, but how are you going to pay for that utility? Let's say, for example, if you created some code and I don't want to do that myself, you might want Bitcoin from me for getting you to do that, right? Because I'm using your time. I'm getting you to spend your time to create something for me. That's how I see it. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, my thoughts are first, let's differentiate a few things. Store of value,
Yeah.
money, and currency. I think they are fundamentally different things. Um, now, Bitcoin, in my opinion, as of now, is a store of value, but not really a currency for one reason: it's deflationary and people hold it for higher pricing. And
Mm,
so I think we need to differentiate between the things. Um, and also scarcity is a term. I've read you tweet about this a few times where we can discuss. I think scarcity is the wrong term.
mm,
I think like you put here in limited supply. I think capped or limited supply is more important because Bitcoin is not scarce, and it's in the sense there's
mm.
actually 21 million, which means it's actually abundant. A Mona Lisa would be scarce, for example, because there's only one. So I don't see Bitcoin as being scarce. Uh, Now, the next thing is store of value. Bitcoin, for example, is open source. And the code is for everybody to have, and it's been forked many times in the past, and it failed. So the real value that Bitcoin has is essentially its decentralization and network effect, in my opinion. Those are the big price or value drivers. Or also, let's include the topic of the power law model. I don't like the word law in that sense either. So I think we need to differentiate. And back to the topic, when I put a certain amount of money into an AI agent, for example, and that AI agent stays with me for many years, then that value is actually stored. And it is producing more value in the sense of a Warren Buffett, Graham value investing sense, where something is actually being produced. So I think it actually does store the value. It doesn't store the value in the sense of Bitcoin and proof of work being tied to natural resources such as electricity and computing power. But if that agent remains with me, then it is actually storing the value and increasing the value and exponentially becoming more intelligent, which Bitcoin doesn't have. Bitcoin is essentially inherently dumb, so to speak, not to be derogatory. It doesn't have inherent intelligence, which such an AI agent does have. And so my hypothesis is that investing in AI agents or automation or in general into AI is like investing into Bitcoin in 2009. I think we are going to see fundamental changes in our monetary system thanks to AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will also affect Bitcoin. I don't know how. I haven't thought this through. It's just a thought experiment at this point. And if such an agent is open source, that means it never dies, really. And it's giving me what I actually want to store, my time, my lifetime. That's the most valuable asset that we have. And so it's taking away the labor that I need to maintain my life. And if you have hundreds of agents, then you just have to essentially sit on the couch and get spoon fed while the robot just cooks and the refrigerator orders new food and the lawnmower does the lawn and so on and so on. You have a huge amount of agents working for you, basically a huge company of employees or an army even, and they self-update themselves and they maintain their status over a long time because it's code. It doesn't die. So you can pass it on from generation to generation and think of how intelligent these things will be in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to surpass our human intelligence potentially if we pass singularity. So that's my hypothesis, is that investing into AI may be more profitable for one than investing in Bitcoin in 2009. And second, I think it might be a more interesting store of value. What are your thoughts on that?
So I don't I don't I don't quite agree, but I see where you're coming from. The way that I see it, Bitcoin isn't an investment. It's a savings tool.
Right. And yeah.
It's just a way to save for the future. It's a way to save your purchasing power for the future. Let's say, for example, with gold, all you're doing is you're buying gold and you're holding on to it for the later, and you're expecting that it'll have that value in the future. With AI, for example, something could get corrupted, something could break, there could be a bug, there could be some kind of issue.
But it
Maybe
fixes
things will.
but it fixes itself. It's self-sustaining, self-updating,
Mm,
and self-maintaining,
yeah.
which could theoretically happen to Bitcoin too, which is highly improbable, if not probable.
See,
But
I think one of the differences is that with AI, and everybody in the world doesn't have a stake in making sure that it doesn't break. right? So, for example, with Bitcoin, everybody in the world, well, not everybody, a lot of people in the world have their eyes on Bitcoin's code. A lot of people are looking at Bitcoin regularly. A lot of people are using Bitcoin to store their wealth for the future, to save for the future. So what they're doing is they're testing it out. They're basically attacking it as much as they can to make sure that every one of the bugs and the flaws can come out. I don't know if that's the case for AI yet.
I I think the case is that AI does it itself.
AI does it itself.
Um,
Okay.
to a certain degree at the moment, and will 100% do that in 1 to 2 years. Like my experience now with developing AI has been mind blowing. What it's
Mm-hmm.
actually capable. I'll give you another example. Um, just 2 days ago, I came across a platform where I have a music production background since I was a little child or 16 professionally. Um,
Amazing.
and I found this platform where I just gave in a prompt, and about 2 to 4 minutes later, it spit out a chart ready song, completely produced, vocals, lyrics, mastered, completely chart ready, and very, very
Mm.
likable. I really liked it. And what I'm trying to say is the AI did not make one mistake. Quite the opposite. It was much more perfect than any human could possibly be. And it was chart level. Like, that's saying something.
Wow.
And so the same thing, and that is essentially code, right? And now we're seeing full stack applications being built with one click of a button, from back end to front end storage, authentication, everything. And what happens is the AI notices it gets an error, it reads the error, self corrects. And it
Mm.
continues to go that way until the error is gone. And then it asks you, okay, what do you want to do next? And that is what is really blowing my mind, because it is self correcting. It is the exponential curve is something like that's the greatest human deficiency, is not being able to compute exponential curves. We cannot think in exponentials. It is impossible
Yeah.
for us. We think linearly. But this intelligence, this AI, is exponential to a degree that we cannot comprehend.
Yeah.
And in 1 to 2 years, it's going to be discovering things. Okay, maybe in 5, 10, 15, 20 years,
Whatever the time
discovering
horizon is. Yeah.
discovering things that we have never even thought about before, like when fire was discovered, or electricity. And all of a sudden, we're going to be having a huge amount of Nikola Teslas and Elon Musk's and Albert Einstein's creating new stuff. The intelligence is incomprehensible. And that's why I'm saying such an AI will go along and self-update itself along with the general intelligence of that is out there, open source, and it is open source. So basically, everybody is auditing the code, so that it's free of bugs and also ethically sound and safe. And so that raises questions for me. That raises huge questions for me from an investor perspective. That over the last few days has somewhat changed my mind, and I'm still thinking it through. But I do see it as a store value and a significant investment, like
See,
investing
I
in
don't.
Bitcoin in 2009.
I see where you're coming from. The only issue is that, let's say, for example, if you wanted to pay a farmer for apples, how are you going to pay them with AI? Right? The AI that you may have may not have any value to them. I think that that's the thing with Bitcoin. The Bitcoin, I get what you're saying. I get where you're coming from. The
Mhm.
value of AI is all there. The issue with AI is that it gives you utility. Bitcoin doesn't specifically give you utility. Bitcoin
Right?
gives you just a way to save. It gives you it gives you a good that has the same value for everyone. Like AI, for example, you might find that, like, let's say the music AI that you were talking about, if you wanted to buy my car and you wanted to give me that AI because you worked on it, because you find value in it, I don't personally want it because I don't find value in that. But that's just me, right? That doesn't mean it's not valuable. Is that I don't personally find it valuable. On the other hand,
Mhm.
with something like US dollars, for example, US dollars, we all agree that they have no utility, but the value is there because everybody agrees that it has value. Not everybody can agree that that specific AI will have value. I get what you're saying though. I get that it's an investment. It's a way to build for the future, to build humanity, to make things cheaper, to make things easier. Maybe I'm wrong here, but the way that I see it, what we need as money or as a store of value is something that everyone will accept. Right. So, for example, the reason why we have a store of value, the reason why Bitcoin is a store of value is because we expect that the entire world will want it at some point, right? Everybody in the world will eventually see what Bitcoin is and they'll want it for their goods and services. For example, if I wanted to pay for a house, I could probably pay for it with Bitcoin. If I wanted more dollars, I could give away my Bitcoin and I can get those dollars in exchange. I guess we're looking at it from a different. I
I,
guess we started
I,
off.
I totally agree with you. I see also see where you're coming from. Let me try to put it from a different perspective.
Yeah, of course.
I myself would consider myself to be from the Austrian school. Obviously, I wouldn't be a Bitcoiner otherwise. But what I see happening with AI is some kind of Marxist utopia where money does not exist and
Mm,
all goods belong to the people. So similar to Bitcoin, I also believe that Bitcoin is people money and it bridges socialism and capitalism because it basically bonds
wow.
together the collective and the individual, which has been one of the hugest, the largest dilemmas in history is that the collective does not respect the individual needs, and the individual does not respect the collective needs. Both are extremes, and I think that Bitcoin brings all of these together and basically puts us all in one boat, so we're not poking holes into our boat. Um, and so I think AI is going to do that to a much larger degree. It's going to be software for the people. Nobody's going to need to pay for goods because we will have more agents than apps on our phone.
Yeah.
You see, they will be free everywhere because it's all open source. What did you say? The farmer with his apples, uh, he will have agents running robots, automated, and he'll be on the couch being spoon fed. Um, so that's kind of like where I see this all going into this Marxist utopia. It's an extreme case, and I see this in 30, 40 years, maybe shorter. Um, but I think it's a very interesting thought because
Yeah.
it is code for the people again. It is like Bitcoin is for the people, and it takes away power from government and gives it back to the people. And you basically create your own employees like out of thin air.
Yeah.
and so I think it's a hugely interesting topic, and I'm still in the process of wrapping my head around it. So I don't know. Um, and to your viewers too, like please confront me with it, prove me wrong. Um, I welcome everybody to enter the discussion if somebody sees a need for it.
See, I think this is so interesting because I was thinking about the same thing, and what you mentioned was really important. It bridges the gap between socialism and capitalism. That's what AI does. I think Bitcoin does the same thing.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm essentially
Oh,
saying.
right. I thought you said AI does that. Oh no, no. Maybe I
No,
understood you. Maybe I heard you wrong. But
I even
I
made a
agree with you.
post about. I even sent you a video where
Oh,
I
you
was
did.
actually, talking about it. That Bitcoin actually bridges the left and the right wing.
Yeah.
I like to call it collectivism and individualism, or collectivism and free markets, because
Yeah.
socialism is essentially the opposite of individual freedom, and in the extreme cases, and individual freedom is the opposite of socialism. So
Mm,
they kind of cut each other out. And
yeah.
Dr. Martin Luther King said exactly that, they're not compatible with each other. And I think for the first time in history, that Bitcoin unites everybody. And if the individual profits, the collective profits. And if the collective
Yeah.
profits, the individual profits. And I find that a fundamental shift in economics and politics that we see coming. And I think AI is going to decentralize largely, bring back power to the people, and will have a similar function as Bitcoin, a similar adoption, but just at a much higher accelerated speed. And very interesting topic, but yeah.
Honestly, that gave me a different way of thinking. I hadn't even thought of it that way before. The way that I saw AI was, oh, you can get it to do things for yourself. You can automate some processes. I didn't see it that way. I didn't see it. What you just brought up in this conversation really makes me think. It makes me want to do a deeper dive into AI. I mean, I didn't really think that. If I'm being honest with you, I didn't think AI would be that important. But you've
Me
given
too.
me, you've, I think you've shone a light on something that I did. It was something that I didn't see. It was in basically my, what was it? My blind spot. I didn't see it that way. I didn't understand it that way. And you gave me that perspective that really makes me want to look into it more. I feel like I'm going to spend a long time actually doing a deep dive into this, which it'll probably be very useful for my future. And I thank
Yeah.
you for that. I thank you for bringing that up. I really do.
I'm actually very happy that you accepted this well.
Of course.
I was actually very hesitant to bring up the topic, and because I know that you're the Bitcoin guy, right? And your topic is Bitcoin, and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, and I know that a lot of people watching will dislike me for my statements, but I hope that they also understand what I'm trying to say, because for like literally like 5 days ago, I had that same blind spot, and all of a sudden it just went click when I heard also Andreessen's
The podcast.
prediction. All of a sudden it just clicked, and I was like, the same aha moment that I had when I got into crypto. It was like, oh my God, this is fundamental. This is a fundamental change that people need to, specifically people who invest and are looking to store their value, that they need to question heavily, because let me go even further. Just like Bitcoin is sucking out the power of the global debt bubble, I think AI will do that even faster, because it's actually producing, so it's actually creating value, which reduces inflation, for one.
Yeah.
Second, it is self-intelligent, inherently intelligent, which gives it exponential growth at rates that we cannot fathom, like beyond
Hmm.
comprehension. Like in 5 years, we're going to see things we have never seen before. Just like you and I have just now discovered these small AI things,
Yeah.
and I think the future. Of course, there's a huge negative downside, a dystopian vision that could happen in all of this, AI turning against humans. I don't want to discredit that, but I think any investor looking to store value or to make an investment, I think we are in 2009 where we could have invested in Bitcoin, because back then, I don't know, 5,000 Bitcoins or 10,000 Bitcoins were what, a
20
dollar
bucks.
or something like that. Like,
The price of a pizza or two
yeah,
pizzas. Yeah.
exactly.
25 $30. Yeah.
And it's the same thing right now. You can produce an AI agent for cents. And now imagine this. Over 10 years, you train that AI agent. Imagine the actual value you could sell that AI agent for over 10 years of training. You're
Yeah.
basically building a company, a completely autonomous company, completely hands off.
Yeah.
It,
See,
it,
I get what you're saying, but the difference is that with Bitcoin you don't have to do anything. You just own it You hold it, you put it in your wallet, you just leave it, right? With AI, you actually have to work on it. You have to create this. It's the difference between investing and saving, right? You're investing in this AI agent and you're building it and you're creating more and more of it. You're creating value you're adding value to it. With Bitcoin, you don't need to do that. You just hold on to it. Like you literally just buy it, you put it in your
Mhm.
wallet, and you can just bury it in your backyard and you don't have to do anything. But you expect that somebody in the future will want it. With the AI, if you do that, let's say you just buy it today for a few cents, you're if you don't add any value to it, people probably won't buy it from you.
That's correct, but all you really have to do is formulate a prompt.
Right.
uh, at this point right now, like in 5 years, it's going to do all that itself. It's going to basically understand your needs. It's going to
Yeah.
understand your environment, and it's going to do everything itself,
Yeah.
completely autonomously. Right now, you just need to prompt it, and it
Yeah.
does everything. So there's not really much effort that you have to put into it. So I see the difference, and it's a complete mind shift, in my opinion,
Oh yeah.
from monetary saving, investing. But what you're doing is basically investing um, into AI agents that are companies, self-sustaining companies. And what I would also like to point out is what we see over time is you have technology replacing technology. You start with rocks, seashells, silver, gold, fiat, Bitcoin now at the best point. But I think we need to detach a little bit from our attachment to certain technologies or brands. And we need to embrace the speed of technological change. Because Bitcoin, I'm super bullish, but it's just a matter of time until it becomes replaced by the next technology, in my opinion. It's hard to believe that something will not replace it, in my opinion,
I think that's
evolutionarily speaking.
yeah. I think that's where I think that's where we don't agree. Because
Okay.
Bitcoin is the discovery of digital scarcity, and that's what makes it so special. If we know how digital scarcity works now,
Mhm.
and we can recreate it, and that's perfectly fine. But it's the network effect, right? So let's say, for example, if I
The
came up
network.
to you, like let's say for example Caspa or Nano or all these other coins, they promise that they have better use cases, they have this, they have that, but at the end of the day, they've just basically tried to replicate Bitcoin. Would you want the copy or would you want the original, right? I think that's the question that a lot of people have. Let's say for example with the tire, we created the wheel or the tire or whatever, decades or hundreds, I think 100 years ago or something like that, but we haven't changed it because it works so well. The way that it works so well. We can change it, but the thing is that we're probably not going to be able to add enough to it to make it that much more useful. So, for example, if we come out with a different currency, if we come out with a different cryptocurrency, first of all, you have to find people to trust it. That's one thing. Then you have to find people to test it out, to use it constantly. You have to give them, they have to think about the opportunity cost, whether or not they save in Bitcoin versus they save in this currency. What if this currency is wrong? They have to basically give away their Bitcoin to get this currency, right? Or if they have this currency, maybe they can give it away and they can get Bitcoin. So do you think, let's say, for example, all these forks that we saw, we have BCH, BSV, all these different ones. The reason why they haven't performed, they offer better services, better quality, better whatever, but the thing is that people sell them because they don't have the network effect. They don't have they don't see the promises playing out. Bitcoin BTC is just so much better because of the network effect that nothing else can replace it. I mean, I get what you're saying again. I
I
see
completely
see
agree
where
with you. I completely
everything changes.
agree.
Yeah.
And I actually have my introduction to cryptocurrencies were through altcoins.
Mm,
And I
same.
built a company, a music streaming platform with built-in currency. And
Mm,
I won awards for that, or I have to also give credit to Metacris, Barzit, and Nikolai for helping me for that. It was an amazing project. And I learned through better technologies than Bitcoin.
mm,
such as Neo back then. Neo was number 3 in market cap and labeled the Ethereum killer.
Mm.
And they were technologically a lot better than anything on the market at that point. But their network effect blew up. They made a huge amount of mistakes. They were centralized. And what I'm trying to say is, I do not believe that any of the altcoins will be better than Bitcoin. What I'm speaking of is a fundamentally different technology,
Mm.
like AI.
Yeah.
Bitcoin as a blockchain is indisputable. It's king, and it will remain king. There's not, because of the network effect, the decentralization. You can fork it as many times as you want. You're not going to replicate that.
Yeah.
I fully agree with you. Bitcoin remains king. But what I'm speaking of is technology replacing technology, a completely new, fundamentally technology that maybe make monetary value redundant.
Mm.
That's
Yes,
my
that's
my.
something that I haven't even thought of. I haven't even considered that. So
It's a brain fart, so to speak.
it is.
Like I really haven't thought it through, but I also want to say that I feel that I would be dishonest in just speaking only positive about Bitcoin and having these thoughts in the back of my mind. I think it would be dishonest to your viewers also if I don't at least mention this topic,
Of course.
and also to you to make your own decisions. And so that's why I really wanted to point that out. I do not in any way want to spread FUD or, I'm a Super Bowl Bitcoin bull. I would consider myself actually a maximalist, but I do see interesting developments in other altcoins, but not for. You shouldn't speculate with them. You can have fun with
Yeah.
them. The technologies are interesting, but Bitcoin remains king. Period.
I can see that. I like the reason why I like these conversations so much is because it makes me think differently. And I think you just did that really well. You made me think
Thank you.
differently on something like that I hadn't even considered before. And to me, that's really important because it expands my horizon. It makes me think more about where things can go in the future. And I think that's the point of podcasts, right? The point of podcasts is
Yeah.
to learn about things that maybe you haven't considered before. The even when somebody's listening to a podcast, they listen to it because they want somebody to ask questions that maybe they haven't even thought of, right? And
Right,
I
right.
think I think that's what you brought up. You brought up a topic that I hadn't even thought of before, and that's so useful. I feel like that's one of the most
I'm super
important things
happy
we talk
about
about.
that. As I said, I was hesitant
Absolutely.
to bring it up, and we haven't even touched on the power law either. And Giovanni, I think that's also a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
What do you think about what is your current stance on the Bitcoin power law?
So with the power law, I didn't quite understand it before. I thought it was a prediction, a way to predict what Bitcoin's price is going to be in the future. But I had a conversation with Sina. I don't know if you know him, Sina 21st Capital on Twitter. I posted a conversation with him on my YouTube channel, and I thought it was really useful because it explained to me things that I had completely not understood before. It's a math model that's predicting based on probabilities where Bitcoin's price could be in the next 20, 30 years. And there's no that you can't really break the model, right? Because there's always a chance that things would go to the upside where you don't expect them to be. So let's say, for example, there's something like a 99% chance that Bitcoin's price will go up to $285,000 this cycle. That's a
Hmm.
99% chance. It's not like the people who are working on the power law who are talking about the power law are saying that it can't go to $1 million. It can. There's
Yes.
just a very, very small chance of it happening, which I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, it gave me a different perspective. Again, that conversation was really great because I feel like
Mhm.
I feel like having conversations with smart people makes me a lot smarter. And that was one of those conversations. This is one of those conversations where there's a blind side that I had, that a blind spot that I had that I hadn't even realized. Of course, it's a blind spot. People don't even realize it, right? You don't know what you don't know. That conversation was one of those conversations where I
Mhm.
didn't know what I didn't know, and now I know a little bit more. And I think that would probably stand because it's just math, right? It's just telling you the probabilities of Bitcoin's price in the future. And I think this conversation was great as well because again, I hadn't even thought of AI potentially changing
Well,
everything, making everything free. Um, I don't personally agree with the fact that AI will replace Bitcoin as a store of value, but it's something that maybe I'll keep thinking about and maybe I'll change my mind on it.
yeah, I'm not sure either, to be honest. I don't
Of
know,
course.
but I think it's an interesting thought that if if an agent can live beyond your life
Yeah.
and beyond to next generations, then in my opinion, it is actually a store of value that increases in value inherently.
Hmm.
And I think that's a super interesting topic. And
Definitely.
also Giovanni's Bitcoin power law topic, I think is also very interesting. I had a very passionate discussion with him on, I think, one of your threads on X, and we kind of got into it because he was making some statements that I couldn't take him serious anymore, such as the Bitcoin price has nothing to do with supply and demand. That was one of his statements, and that economics are fundamentally wrong. And I was like, what is this dude talking about? Like, you can't make such statements and consider yourself a professional. And so we
Yeah.
really got into it, and he is very passionate. And so after a while, we started to get along, and I realized he's a really, really super cool guy, very passionate,
Yes.
Italian temperament, passionately. And then later, I saw his Breedlove interview, and I was like, who's this? Like a completely different person.
Yeah.
Like, he was like completely professional, completely objective, scientific, uh, like completely on point with his power law theory, Bitcoin power law theory, to a point where I was like, wow. And that's why I listened up and I was like, okay, this guy really knows his stuff. He really knows what he's talking about. And then I started listening and I was like, okay, I mean, the power law as such is very clearly proven as statistically, empirically. But I think the terminology of law is a misnomer. It's misleading because it is not a physical law. It's not like
Hmm.
Newton's law of gravity.
See,
And
that's what I asked Sina when he came on my conversation. Is it the same as the law of physics? And he's like, no, no, no,
okay,
that's not. He actually mentioned exactly what you said. It shouldn't be called a law. It should be something different. But
I
I get
think
what you're
that's
saying. Yeah.
super. I think that's really important to
Yeah.
emphasize because similar to the stock to flow model, people take these things very seriously. And what
Yeah.
we're statistically seeing is correlation and not causation. And
Yeah.
there's a huge difference between the two, stock to flow. And now imagine this. I would make the assumption that around 80% of Bitcoiners believe that stock to flow is valid. That makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy
Yeah.
because people perceive it to be a law. And it's the same thing with Giovanni's Bitcoin power law. People will perceive it as a physical law and believe that it's going to actually become some Bitcoin utopia. And I think it's very important to differentiate between statistics, which are easily manipulated, and physical laws
Yeah.
to not mislead Bitcoiners. And I think it may have even been Giovanni himself that told the story where he was able to replicate the stock to flow model with random sports data.
Wow.
So that makes you think like statistics are very relative and easy to manipulate.
Was that in his interview with Breedlove?
To be honest, I don't even know if it was Giovanni. I
Oh,
don't
mine was
remember
Breedlove.
who it was. I think it might have been him. But maybe in that interview criticizing the stock to flow model, I think it
Ah,
might
okay.
have been him, maybe in that interview. And I think that's a very interesting thought, but I also think that applies to his own model of
Yeah.
the power law. It's correlation at this point, but at a certain point, when you reach a critical mass, 50%, 60%, 70% that believe in it, it becomes causation because people believe it. And then all of a sudden people say, this is a law. It's going to happen, and it becomes causation. And that's where bubbles actually begin to build.
Right.
And
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially.
exactly. And I think it's important to inform viewers that there is a difference between a statistical, empirical law and a physical law, and that these are just observations and they do not actually predict the price. And it's very easy to debunk the argument. If an asteroid hits tomorrow, his Bitcoin power law theory will be completely redundant, but gravity will remain.
Yeah.
And people need to differentiate between these two, in my opinion. It's very important to not mislead people with mental models like and terminology like law. I think it's very important to emphasize that.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually have him on my podcast
Hmm.
in I think he booked a meeting already, but I'm gonna have him on here and I'm gonna ask him some of these questions. I think he'll be able to answer them pretty well. I'm gonna give him credit in advance. I think he's a really smart guy. He'll probably be able to tell me exactly what his thoughts are. Maybe he'll tell me, oh, it shouldn't be a law, it should be this or that. But let's see what he says.
Let me add to that. I believe if I were to debate Giovanni, I would lose. Um, I think he knows his stuff and he is
He does.
clearly more informed than I am. And I would also like to talk to him and ask him questions about it. So I'm just also learning, and I look up to what he says. I think he's very intelligent, and I look forward to your podcast with him.
Absolutely. I'm gonna listen to the Breedlove one, and then I'm gonna go into it with him. Hey, okay. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to ask you one last question here. I ask this to all my podcast, all my
Okay,
hosts, my
I've
guests.
never heard it
I want to
before.
ask you.
Let's go for it.
So the question is, what do you think is the most important downstream effect of Bitcoin? Just over the next, let's say Bitcoin becomes the form of money that we use. Let's put everything away about AI. AI is going to be important, but AI won't be the store of value, won't be the money. What do you think will be the most important effect of Bitcoin over the next 10, 20, 30 years?
What do you mean by effect?
So let me give you my example. So the way that I see it, Bitcoin is going to demonetize real estate, meaning that we're going to
Oh,
see people able to build houses. They're going to be able to buy houses. They're going to be able to build families. They're going to, I think the population growth rate is going to increase. The fertility rate is going to increase because of
okay.
this fact that Bitcoin is money and it's going to replace the shitty form of money that we have today, the form of
Yeah.
money that can be replicated at will, be created out of thin air. Bitcoin is going to replace that, so it's going to change everything. In my opinion, that's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not going to be the case. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this. Maybe this isn't going to happen. Maybe houses continue to be the best store of value, and the rich people want to keep the houses. But I mean, that's how I see it. That's the utopia that I have in my mind.
Yeah, I do have a similar utopia in my mind. I believe that we're going to see a shift or an increasing disparity between rich and broke, which
Mm,
means we will have Bitcoiners and no Bitcoiners. And I think we will also begin to learn to protect our wealth by
yes.
building gated communities. For example, I think El Salvador is one of the first unofficial gated communities, so to speak. They
Mm,
basically put away all the gangs in jail and to protect the wealth. And I think I see in the future also citadels being built to protect the wealth. And I think all Bitcoin holders will live in a deflationary utopia. On the one side, you have AI making things 1,000 times cheaper. For fiat holders, that means they may be able to afford 1,000 times more. For Bitcoin holders, that means they will be able to afford 1,000,000 times more.
yeah.
Um, so I see us living in a deflationary utopia if it continues this way. And where things are going to go wrong is security, because every Bitcoin holder is essentially its own bank, and banks spend millions, billions for security. And what's going to happen is that crime is going to increase. You take somebody's
Mm,
daughter, put a gun to their head, and tell them, give me your Bitcoin. What do? I tell you, 99% of Bitcoiners have no idea what they would do in that, except how they would protect themselves, except for giving out the money.
yeah.
And you have no other choice unless you really understand how to protect your Bitcoin. And that's what I've been working on for years. I've developed a model that I'm not really giving out at this point because it would put myself in danger. But I think that's something people really need to look into is how to protect their wealth in the future, how to store their keys from multiple dangers. And it's going to be a deflationary utopia, in my opinion, where basically you'll be able to afford anything you want
Yeah.
because Bitcoin price just goes up and up.
Yeah, I can see that. I think there's also going to be sorry, I was just thinking of something. Oh, there's going to be probably better ways to store your Bitcoin over time and to make it so that people can't do what you're saying. But I guess that's what comes with self sovereignty. You have to deal with all that. You have to understand how to protect yourself. You have to understand how to protect your wealth. If you don't do the proper due diligence, then I guess you're going to be screwed.
Yes, I've been hacked. I've been blackmailed. I've been
Well,
DDoSed. Um, I've lost a lot of money, and I'm lucky that that happened at such an early stage
mhm.
because now I spent years actually thinking that through how to protect my wealth. And if it would have happened at a later point, that would have been devastating. And
Yeah,
so I think it's important to encourage everybody to really get into the topic of how to secure your keys, um, fire, storms, war, uh, theft, blackmail. There are so many threats that you
yeah,
really need to be prepared for, and also government. That's something a lot of people don't really think about. How they'll confiscate it in a second. So yeah, I see a utopian scenario with dystopian effects, and people need to learn to protect themselves
yeah.
seriously.
Either way. Yeah.
Like for example, the Bitcoin family. Have you ever heard of them?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Where they
Yeah,
sold all their Bitcoin, they sold all
well,
their
yeah,
stuff
yeah. For
like
example, they
years
have
ago.
their keys spread across multiple continents and safes. So if one nuclear war breaks out, you still have it on the other side of the continent.
Yeah.
And there are ways where you really need to think about this. I think it's super important.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's so important as well. I think just understanding the downsides, the upsides, all that stuff is so important because without understanding all that, you won't make the right decisions. If you don't understand the downsides, if you don't understand the upsides, you can't prepare for a future where maybe somebody tries to take your Bitcoin from you, somebody tries to take your wealth from you.
Yes, and I even go as far as to say, if you don't understand it technically, then it is actually better. And I know I'm going to get hate for this, but it is actually maybe better to store your crypto on an exchange who actually puts money into security. They put billions
Mm.
into security. Like, for example, Coinbase, you can store your keys offline. I mean, Michael Saylor is putting how many billions in custody with Coinbase? You do, they're not going to make the mistakes that a normal human makes. See what I'm saying? So if
Yeah.
you're not technical, um, before you lose your money, maybe store it on an exchange. It's something that's very controversial, and I get a lot of hate for that. Um, but store it there first, learn the basics, and then put it onto a ledger or your own node or however far you want to go.
Yeah, I don't see. I don't personally like the idea of putting Bitcoin on an exchange just because the exchange can take it from you. But I get what you're saying. I get where you're coming from. If you're gonna make mistakes, like let's say for example, if you're trying to send Bitcoin to yourself and you have a ledger, you don't even know how the ledger works. You're probably
Right.
going to be worse off sending that Bitcoin to yourself and holding that Bitcoin offline. Because what some people will do is they'll hold they'll put their recovery phrase on their cell phone, and then their cell phone will get
Right.
scanned, and people will take their Bitcoin from them. So then that's probably a much worse case scenario, and a higher chance of that happening than an exchange shutting down like Coinbase. But I
That's
think
exactly my point.
at a point, I think having your own keys is important. Setting up your own way
Absolutely.
of having your Bitcoin stored is the most important thing.
Totally on the same page.
Awesome, awesome. Hey,
Mhm.
okay, so I want to ask you, do you have any final tips for my audience here? Anything that they can that you can suggest, maybe that they can think about, that they can learn about? Any tips on how to navigate the coming bull run? Anything that
Well,
you feel important?
one, what I just mentioned, it's not always important to build the upside. It's more important to protect the downside.
Yeah,
Um, it's more important to prevent loss of your keys and to protect yourself. I think it's very important not to speculate upwards, but to protect the downside. The coming bull run, I think, if Bitcoin goes to 1 million by the end of the year, I'm selling. I'm selling.
everything.
Um, if by the end of the year, if Bitcoin hits 1 million, like in within 4 weeks, I probably would sell everything. Um,
By the end of 2024 or 2025?
24. Like I'm
Oh wow,
speaking of
okay.
an extreme scenario. Like
Yeah.
if in 4 weeks it hits 1 million, I'm selling everything. Like no question for me. Um, but waiting to buy back when the bubble bursts, hopefully. Um, Otherwise, I do consider myself long term to be a hodler. I don't like to move my crypto at all or my Bitcoin at all. Um, I don't like literally move it whatsoever. I completely forget it.
Mhm.
And I don't see that happening that this year Bitcoin will go to 1 million. I don't think it'll be in 25 or 26. It might be with the next halving cycle, I believe. It'll become realistic. Maybe we will reach 1 million with an extreme bubble this cycle because we have nation state FOMO going on. Um, and the demand is increasing. I also see a huge dilemma at this point, which is you see countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, where Max Kaiser was claiming that they are going to make a huge purchase.
Massive purchase. Yeah.
Well, but there's a conflict there because they cannot announce it, because
Mhm.
if they do, the price surges.
Yeah.
So everybody needs to be quiet and nobody is allowed to speak about what they're actually going to do, like the big players, because the price will explode and then they will basically get it at a higher price. So they have an incentive to keep the price low.
Mhm.
And I think that there are big players like BlackRock, Saudi Arabia, United States involved now. They have an interest in keeping the price low. And it's going to explode once the genie is out of the bottle and you won't be able to get it back in. It's then it's I don't hear you anymore.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't think that's something that anybody can argue with. That at some
Yeah,
point, every country will want Bitcoin. They'll need Bitcoin.
yeah,
See, I have a question for you.
mhm.
What if that bubble is actually not a bubble? What if it's a
I
real?
know,
Because
yeah,
all these countries, like if it goes to $1 million by the end of this year, there has to be a reason for it, right? And we expect that people will sell their Bitcoin if it goes to $1 million. But see, the issue with the dollar is that it can be printed out of thin air. It can be created out of thin air. The
yeah,
value that we have, it's like what you said. We assign value to Bitcoin based on the dollar, and the dollar is basically worthless, right?
yeah,
We just perceive it to have value. So technically $1 million Bitcoin is still cheap because it's something that can be created out of thin air to purchase something that can't be created out of thin air. So to me, I mean, I get what you're saying. Maybe sell some of your stack. I wouldn't sell all of it.
I'm not sure at this point. I totally agree with you. The demand is so high that it's really hard to say, is it a bubble or is it just pure demand?
Yeah.
And I think I would have to. That's why I brought this extreme scenario. Uh, Within 4 weeks, I do not believe that it would go from 100,000 to a million in 4 weeks. That would
Yeah.
be a clear indication of a bubble from me, and it would at some point neutralize. And I would probably get out of that, but I don't see that happening. I see that the bear markets are going to be less and less um,
Violent, intense.
violent and stomach aching. And I do believe it's the nation state FOMO, or even it's going to go even more into these conglomerates of NATO, for example, having a Bitcoin currency, whereas BRICS, they're on the gold bug side. But it's really hard to say if it becomes a bubble. And for me, it's the timing. So if it's in 4 weeks, for me, it would be a bubble. If it's within a regular cycle, then continue to hodl, and it'll get easier and easier over time. Just as Costolani, the great investor, said, put it under your pillow, lay to sleep, wake up, and you're rich. And I think that's the best way to go with Bitcoin. I don't really recommend any form of trading. I don't recommend it, and you should know what you were doing.
Yeah.
And that's also why I brought up this extreme scenario, because I kind of know what I'm doing, but I don't want to put out any financial advice that people don't take me serious at all, please. Um,
Yeah. I
that would
mean,
be
I think that's
irresponsible.
I think that's reasonable. I think that's reasonable. Thinking that if it goes to $1 million, you'll sell at least some of it. Maybe I
Yeah.
wouldn't sell all of it, regardless, because it just means that the dollar's value has gone down, right? Fewer people want the dollar. So why would you want the dollar? That's how I see it.
I would just expect the bubble to burst and to go from a
Yeah.
million back to 200,000, and then I would be able to purchase five
Buy back.
times as many.
Right.
It's pure speculation. It never works out as you intended to do.
Yeah.
Like the margins are really high on the low side and the high side. You never really get the top. You never get the bottom.
Yeah.
So I do not really recommend it. But if in 4 weeks it goes to a million, I'm really going to give it some thought.
Yeah.
But I don't recommend it unless you really know what you're doing. Trading is not good. In my opinion, it's not something to promote, specifically day trading. I'm totally opposed against trading as such, and I see Bitcoin as savings and investment. I see it as both. Also, a certain degree of speculation. It's
Hmm.
kind of everything. Um, but there's at this point nothing you can do better than to hold onto your Bitcoin for the
That's it.
next for the indefinitely, like for and pass it on to your children. I think that's the most ethical thing you can do, because we right now are living in a debt bubble in prosperity that our next generations basically have to pay off. And that is so unethical if you think about it. Like, we have a global debt about 300 trillion, and our next generations have to pay that off. That's almost the definition of fascism. Like, we're putting all our debt onto our children. And
Yeah.
I think it just only makes sense to take your Bitcoin, hold them, and build generational wealth and break the cycle of poverty within your family, and try to build a foundation for your family to continue in the future,
Yeah.
without having to, work their butts off and basically become slaves of the economy, so to speak, and to live a life of meaning and do what they actually perceive to be important. I think
Yeah.
that's the optimal way of doing things. That is my personal plan. But yeah, let's leave it at that.
Yeah. That's I think that's a great way to put it. And I think you said that perfectly. Just buy, hold. That's really all you have to do. Hey,
Right.
David, that was a great conversation. Can
Fully
you just
agree.
mention where my audience can find you?
Yes, for one, on X, I am David Walters, and on YouTube at David.Walters. And that's on Instagram, I am David Walters. It's the same. So,
Okay.
but I do focus on X. So follow
Okay.
me and hit me up if you have questions. And if you want to roast my hypothesis, feel free to call me out and prove me wrong. I'm really open to discussion.
Amazing. Amazing. So I'll link your Twitter in the description down below, and we can I guess my audience can just look into your content, see what they have, see what you have, see what you like. Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
That's
That was a
amazing.
great conversation. Thank you, David. I appreciate your time.
Raja, thank you very much, and thank you for your service in the name of the Bitcoin community. You're doing a great job in educating people, and I think it was an awesome talk. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and exchanging thoughts. And thank you very much for having me on.